At a certain point in a life that has been seriously lived, the interior begins to make demands that the exterior can no longer satisfy. And this doesn't arrive all at once. It builds slowly across months and mostly years in signals that are really easy to override when the momentum of the life is strong enough. A tiredness that sits deeper than the week accounts for. And there may be a flatness that follows an achievement that was supposed to feel significant. And there may be a sadness that arrives on an ordinary evening without any obvious cause and stays for a while and then lifts and then comes back. And maybe an anxiety that has no clear object. And it's not about anything specific. It's just present. It's running underneath the days like a low frequency that nothing quite switches off. And most people override these signals for a long time because their life is working, because there are things that need doing, because the signal is quieter than the demand, and the demand is always there. It's immediate and concrete and requiring a response. And so the signal gets noted and set aside, and the day continues, and the signal comes back and gets noted and set aside again. And this has nothing to do with failure or not being good enough. This is what a serious life in full motion does. It keeps moving. It carries what needs to be carried. It meets what arrives. And somewhere in the carrying and the meeting across years and decades, something interior accumulates that the carrying and the meeting were never going to address. And this episode is about what that something is and why it arrives when it does, and what the system, the body, the nervous system, the mind, the energetic system, field, and consciousness has actually been trying to communicate through the signals that the momentum of the life made it so easy to keep overriding. So to understand this, it helps to understand what the first phase of a life actually requires of the system. And the building years make specific and unrelenting demands. And there's usually a career constructed through sustained efforts, their long hours, the proving, the accumulation of competence and position across years that required the full force of the system to sustain. And the financial foundations that didn't arrive ready-made, but had to be built through discipline and sacrifice and the particular anxiety of not yet being stable enough to relax. The family, if it came, the love and the demand arriving together, the body learning to run on less sleep and more responsibility, the nervous system calibrating to a background hum of things that needed managing that never fully resolved. The relationships tended, the obligations have been met, and the life held together across decades through a quality of sustained effort that became so familiar it stopped registering as effort and became simply the way things were. And the body learned to push through fatigue. The nervous system developed a background readiness. It was braced. It was oriented toward the next thing that needed managing. That became the ordinary texture of just being alive. And the energetic system organized around output, around movement and momentum, around the sustained forward movement that the building genuinely required. And for many people in those years, the system also reached outward for intensity in whatever form was available, because a system wired for expansion and output reaches for intensity everywhere, not just in work, not just in building, but in everything it touches. The physical pushing and pushing through the pain, and maybe more extreme sports, and the body taken to its limits, because that quality of aliveness at the edge felt like something the ordinary days didn't provide. And the experiences sought and collected, and the places, the encounters, the things done and achieved and ticked off, because the system in that phase knows how to want and knows how to reach and keeps moving toward the next thing that might produce the feeling of being fully alive. And for some, this included a spiritual dimension. There was the retreat that cracked something open, or the teacher whose presence flooded the room with something the nervous system had never encountered, or the practice that produced heightened or cathartic release or altered states, or the felt sense of touching something vast and real beneath the surface of ordinary experience. It was sought and given to with genuine commitment, and carrying underneath the genuine commitment the same quality that ran through everything else in those years: the pushing, the reaching, the wanting of more, the moving on to the next encounter that might go further than the last one. And for others, the inner life simply wasn't part of the picture. The full force of the system was directed outward for so long and so completely that there was genuinely nothing available for anything else. And it wasn't through neglect, it was just the life was full and the demands were real and the interior could wait. And so the intensity seeking took different forms for different people. And underneath all of its different forms, the same system was running. The body, nervous system, energetic system, field, consciousness was organized around output and expansion and the reaching for more of whatever produced the feeling of being alive. And then something, at some point, begins to change. And for the person whose outer life has largely completed its arc of construction, maybe for those whose career has reached its maturity, whose financial foundations have steadied, whose family has found its rhythm, whose decades of sustained effort have produced the structure that was always being worked toward, the change arrives through a particular kind of hollowness. And so the life looks exactly as it was intended to look. And from the outside and from most of the inside, nothing is wrong. And something essential is missing in a way that is difficult to name because there is no obvious cause for it and nothing obvious to point to. And so the promotion arrived, and the week after it felt surprisingly ordinary. And the business reached the target, and something that was supposed to come with that didn't quite come. The children are doing well, the relationship is functioning, the work is respected. And on a Wednesday evening, sitting in a kitchen in a life that is completely fine, a sadness arrives that has no object. And there isn't a grief for anything specific. It's not a depression in a clinical sense, just a sadness, a hollowness, an emptiness. And underneath it or alongside it, a question that has been forming for longer than feels comfortable to admit. Is this it? Is this what all the building was pointing toward? Because something that was supposed to be here isn't here. And the next achievement, whatever it is, has consistently failed to provide it. And the practices that were given across the years, whatever form they took, have been producing less of the shift they once produced. And so the retreat lands and passes without reorganizing much. And the cathartic release and the heightened experience that once felt like genuine clearing now feels like processing the same material again. And so the meditation quiets the anxiety for an hour or 2 or 3 or 4, and the anxiety returns unchanged underneath the quieting. And something is being touched repeatedly, and the touching is not reaching the place where the something actually lives. And the system has been saying this quietly and persistently, and through every signal that the momentum of the life made it easy to override. The flatness after the achievement, or the sadness without the cause, and the anxiety that nothing resolves, it's always there underneath it. The sense of a life that is working and an interior that is somewhere else entirely, asking for an attention that the outer life was never going to provide. And for the person whose system has been running at sustained intensity for long enough that something has begun to thin, the change arrives through a different door. And the outer life may also be established, also financially stable, also functioning. And the loop of output and performance and delivery has been running at the pace, the career or the business or the role required for long enough that something in the system has reached its limit. And so where sleep used to restore, it no longer fully restores. Perhaps waking after a full night and finding the tiredness is still there. Not dramatically at first, just present. It's a quality of not quite having arrived back from wherever sleep took the system. And the weekend that used to be enough to reset something fundamental now passes, and Monday arrives and the reset didn't fully happen. But the work continues at full competence. The delivery is there, the reliability is intact, and the aliveness that competent delivery used to produce has thinned into something more like mechanical functioning, getting through rather than genuinely doing. And the body starts to speak more directly. The shoulder that won't release, the digestive system that registers the stress the mind has learned to manage, or the immune system that dips when the pressure peaks, or the nervous system that runs at a particular pitch of activation that was useful once and now simply won't settle. The system that once metabolized intensity and kept moving is now carrying the accumulated weight of years of not stopping in ways that are becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. And if the signals go unheard long enough, the body tends to escalate. There may be an illness that forces a stop, or a health scare, or the burnout that makes continuation impossible. the consequences in health, in relationship, in the energetic system, in the field, in the body, of a system that has been running in a configuration it can no longer sustain. And the stop, when it comes through that door, is not comfortable. The forced stillness of a system that doesn't know how to be still. The particular quality of lying in a body that is finally not performing and not knowing what to do with that. And underneath the discomfort, something. A quality of presence or relief, or simply the first genuine pause in years. So the system is finally getting what it has been asking for, not through choice, but through necessity. And both arrivals, one which is the quiet hollowness of completion or the forced stop of saturation, are the same threshold reached just through different doors. And then there is the person still in the middle of it. You know, the teenagers may still be at home, the career is still at full demand or is still being built, the financial stability may be present or is building, but the space not yet consistently available. And something interior has already begun to move. So the signals are there, the hollowness is being felt, the system is speaking, and the conditions for fully answering what the system is asking aren't quite here yet. And this is real. And what is being felt is real. And the timing isn't fully here yet. And there are also people for whom the safety the second phase requires was never fully built. The financial floor never stable enough to step back from. The demands never easing long enough for the interior to be the primary focus. These people may feel the signal clearly and may struggle to find the conditions for answering it genuinely out of reach. And I think this deserves to be named with honesty and without any judgment. The truth is that the hierarchy of a life is real. What is happening in the interior is real. And what the outer life makes possible determines what can actually be entered. And across all of these different lives and different arrivals at this threshold, something shared is becoming visible. The whole system, the body, the nervous system, the energetic system, the field, consciousness, the mind, it has been organized around the outward direction of the first phase of life, around building and output and momentum and the management of everything the life required. And it has been carrying that organization for decades, not just in the habits and the patterns of behavior, in the actual framework, in the actual architecture, in the body's tissues, in the nervous system's learnt responses, in the way the energetic system and field have arranged themselves around sustained effort and intensity and the reaching for more. And so the signals, the tiredness, the flatness, the anxiety, the hollowness, the cathartic release that clears the surface and leaves the deeper layers unchanged, the practices that touch and pass without reorganizing the ground, these are the system communicating something precise. Not that something is wrong, it is that all of it needs to be addressed together, not the mind separately through understanding, not the emotions separately through release, not the body separately through physical discipline, not the spirit separately through peak experience or transmission or the altered state that visits and recedes. All of it. Body, nervous system, energetic system, field, consciousness, together in sequence, gently, in the way that anything genuinely structural changes, slowly, layer by layer, without force, at the pace the system itself determines. And this is what the exhaustion after the cathartic release was pointing to. The anxiety that meditation quiets but doesn't resolve, or the flatness inside the achieved life, or the burnout that forced the stop, the body that intervened when the mind kept deferring. The system has been asking, across all the years of building and pushing and seeking and overriding, for something it has not yet received. And recognizing that, feeling it clearly, understanding what the signals have actually been communicating is not the same as the system receiving it. That gap is where everything begins. And what keeps arriving in the early mornings before the day starts, or at the red light with the list running through the mind, or at the end of a full day when the noise drops and something underneath it surfaces, that isn't peace. The work hasn't happened yet. Nothing really has resolved. It is pressure. The system pressing through whatever gaps the momentum of the life leaves open. And when those gaps close, finding others. The body that won't recover, and the anxiety that won't settle, the achievement that lands flat, and the morning that feels impossible before it has ever begun. It squeezes, gently at first, easily overridden, and then less gently, and then in ways that can no longer be overridden. Through illness or health scare, through burnout, through injury, through the relationship that finally breaks, through the collapse of the motivation that was always supposed to be there. The system doesn't stop signaling because the signals are being ignored. It escalates. It finds whatever channel is open and presses through that one. It keeps squeezing until something has to give. And when something finally gives, when the stop happens, whether chosen or forced, what becomes possible in that stopping is the first honest hearing of what the system has been saying across all the years of building and pushing and carrying on. The system finally loud enough to be heard. And hearing it is where everything begins. You don't have to understand it, and it's not about thinking about it. It's hearing it in the body, in the nervous system, in the energetic system, in the field, in consciousness, and deciding that what has been asking to be met is finally going to be met. That decision is the threshold. Everything before it was the squeeze.